Welcome to the Mom at Home podcast. We're your hosts. I'm a Gen X mom. My name's Sarah.
And I'm a Gen Z daughter. My name's Anna.
We're trying to discover what it means to be brave, be willing to have that adventure of a lifetime, and how to feel at home. It is such a beautiful day. It's spring where we're at, and all of the flowers are exploding on the trees. It's so pretty.
Guess what, team? I'm allergic to the outside.
Anna's allergic to everything, thanks to her mom. Sorry about that, kiddo.
And I mean, it's awesome. It's like I literally am outside for 5 minutes and I'm sneezing up a storm. But it's okay.
If you have a favorite allergy medicine, pop it in the comments.
Pop it in. Today, we wanted to just dive right in, if that's okay.
This is a deep dive today.
This is a deep dive, and we're bringing in some of my favorite things on the planet.
So good.
We're talking about paradox today and the power of paradox.
So I didn't even learn about paradoxes probably till maybe 2 years ago.
How explore that? How did you not know?
How did I not know what that was?
First of all, before we get into how that happened, let's talk about what it is. What is paradox?
What is a paradox? Paradox is when two things that are true exist at the same time and they're total opposites. So, for example, right now where we live, it's daytime outside, but on the opposite side of the planet, it's night. And it's the exact same moment in time. That's kind of a really broad example of paradox.
Right.
But I think that we're seeing a lot in our community, black and white thinking.
Yeah.
When you're like, things are good or bad, is very different than having the capacity to sit with there's good and bad. So I think in terms of my own healing and my own experience, having the capacity to think in paradoxes and just let that be has been really helpful in helping me understand different perspectives.
Yes, and understanding maybe where people are coming from. Like when you're watching a movie and when there's a really well-written villain in any kind of plot, they have good and bad parts, and for some reason the bad kind of took over and transformed them into whatever kind of crazy monster they are. But even in the monster, there's always that soft spot. Maybe that's a bad example.
No, that's a great example, because a villain's backstory and the hero's backstory is the same.
Yeah.
But what is the difference? It's the meaning that the hero gives to their negative experiences compared to the meaning that the villain gives to their negative experience. But the backstory is the same.
Yeah. Yes.
And typically in movies, you're going to see more of the hero's backstory, but we've seen more in recent past, like the movie Cruella.
Oh, yeah. I loved Maleficent.
You see, like Wicked, all is exploring how can we change the meaning of the story of the bad guy.
Yeah, and in real life, it's not as common for you to find a guy that's like just bad, and they're just this stereotypical villain and they want to take over the world. Do those people exist? Probably.
But no, but they don't, because that's the thing, is like the human experience is so complex.
Right.
That there's good and bad in everybody.
Yes. And all the bad guys do think they're doing the right thing too. They think that they're doing the right thing. So what does that even mean? I don't know. That's what we're exploring
today. So there is a famous artist named Trevor Southley who passed away recently in the last several years. Incredible artist. And he said to me once, there's good in the worst of us and bad in the best of us. The best to me. He said this to me. I'm friends with famous artists. It's really cool.
My famous artist friend. Oh, no big deal.
I gotta get the quote out. There's good in the worst of us and bad in the best of us. The best thing we can do is not judge one another. So there's good in the worst in humanity. There's a spark. And in the best of humanity, there are bad things.
Yeah.
So how do you sit with a contradiction? How do you reconcile? And I think for me personally, embracing paradox has allowed me, when I've learned bad things about people I admire, paradox has allowed me to give them grace and not throw away every contribution they've made. Yeah. And if I'm looking at somebody that is like air quote, because you can't see me, quote unquote, is bad, is to have empathy and maybe like doing the work of sitting with them and hearing stories from people who are different than myself.
Yeah.
And seeing like there's other people that have different life experience than I do.
Right. And also understanding like, okay, if someone's doing it differently than me, does that inherently make them a bad decision? If their decision's different than what I would have chose, does that make it a bad decision, or is it just different?
Correct. Right. And so I don't know if you've heard of the therapist Esther Perel. Have you heard of her? I heard a podcast of hers recently, and she said something that blew my mind. She said the opposite of paradox is polarization. So if we don't have the capacity to sit with two things that are opposite are true at the same time, the opposite of that is actually taking sides and having black or white thinking. I heard that and I was really blown away because in our community today, there's so many issues that people feel like they have to take sides and they have to fight the opposite side. We're seeing that on social media.
Yep.
In the comment section.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about how just terrible comment sections are now because there's no nuance. There's no grappling of different ideas and understanding and having that. No, there's none of that. It's just like, oh, this person is right and here's why they're right. And then, it's silly.
So you're Gen Z, right? You kind of grew up in this environment.
Yeah.
Of Polarized. So what was that like in your like high school days and then during COVID and compared to how you're seeing it now as a college student?
Well, I feel like it's kind of cliche, but initially, I don't know, I think especially in high school, there was kind of a wave of YouTubers that started getting canceled.
Oh, yeah.
And this comes up all the time on the internet, so I don't think it has like the same weight as it used to. It used to be like, oh, you're canceled. Okay, your entire career is going to go up in flames. And it's not like, oh, I just choose not to support that person anymore. It's fine. It was like, no, if I see anyone else supporting that person, then they're inherently a terrible person.
Yeah.
And if someone doesn't understand the weight of the actions of the person getting canceled and they, for some reason, continue to support them and maybe they don't have a full grasp of the situation, it was like they're added to the cancellation because that person doesn't have that drive to just never like consume any of their content, like never buy any of their products. It was like they were wiped off the face of the planet. And that's not to excuse any sort of behavior, but just to observe like how as a whole and as a collective, how we responded to that. And as a teenager, you're kind of like taking in so much information and you're taking in a lot, but you're also very hyper aware of what's happening, especially online. We're so hyper aware of it.
Well, and this is one of the things that's way different for my generation, right? Way different because I remember I went to high school and our high school had an LGBTQ club. And no one at the high school knew about it until it was on the national news. It was on CNN on the 5:00 news because at that time there was way less understanding and compassion and inclusion. And so the school, rather than, because the school had constraints, and what they chose to do is that they canceled all of the clubs because they couldn't just cancel that club because that would have been discriminatory.
Right.
And I didn't hear about that until it was on the national news. And I went to the school. So for my entire junior year, we didn't have any clubs. So I think that's an example of the difference in the communication that kids have today. The younger generation have today.
Well, it's like, I used to be super plugged in, like so plugged in. And before COVID, I started getting really invested in the internet and in what was happening in communities and politically. And with the rise of TikTok, that also really impacted, I think, how plugged in we were. It wasn't just like, oh, fun internet drama anymore.
But it's like you have to bear the weight of all the catastrophes that are happening around the globe simultaneously.
Yeah, and that's when it changes. It shifted for me, at least, of like suddenly 2020 rolled around and I was getting close to voting age and it started affecting my real life relationships.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Anna. And I have a lot of empathy and compassion because as human beings, we're not designed to carry the weight of world catastrophes on our own shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
And especially the younger generation, when your minds are still developing and you're still trying to figure out your confidence and your connection and your friendships. So I think there's a lot of bad rap with the younger generation. And I think that we can, as an older generation, we can look at your generation with more empathy and realize that you have had to shoulder the weight of empathy at such an astounding rate compared to previous generations.
Yeah, it kind of baffled me, and maybe you can talk more about this, but the fact that you didn't really know anything about politics until you had a kid, right?
Oh, for sure. I remember having friends that were really into politics in high school, and I was oblivious, I was uninterested, and it just didn't really affect me because back in the olden days, we had 5 o'clock news and we had 10 o'clock news on the TV, and you'd watch it for a half hour.
That's insane, because now it's like 24-hour loop of catastrophe.
Yes, and then my mom would always get the paper, so my mom would get the paper, and if it was nice outside in the spring or the summertime, she'd read it on the front porch. And so it was a touch point of our day, and we would get the information, but it was like this is the fact. And also, I think it was up until Ronald Reagan's presidency, the journalists were required to show both sides of the story. So if they said, hey, there's this group XYZ that's doing this bad thing, and they told consumers about it, they were required by law to get somebody with the opposite point of view to rebuttal what they said. And that law was removed, and news stories became just like entertained, like it became entertainment. And then you have internet and you have access to all this information. So it's totally changed how we interact with it.
Yeah. And how you feel like you have some sort of impact by writing a rude comment on someone's video.
I don't think that has ever changed anything.
Like, hey, I don't like that. Let me write about a mean comment.
And we get the dopamine hit like we're doing something, but it actually doesn't do anything. It creates polarization, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of devastating.
There's a couple of things that I've learned in how to use paradox for my advantage and in processing. Because social media is obviously one issue, but we all have stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We all have challenges and opportunities to grow. So I would love to share a couple of ideas I have, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
And they're all really easy. So hopefully it's easy to remember so that you can, if you're listening to this, it's like if you're driving or you're on a walk, you can remember and hopefully apply them. But it's just really helped me to step back from the emotional response of the polarization and be like, hey, how can we deal with this in a more helpful way?
Right.
One of the things that I've learned is just to sit with the contradiction. Just let it be.
Yeah.
So the phrase that I've learned, they're 3 words. First is the phrase, of course, followed by the word and.
It's become a kind of joke in our house. We're like, and see, we can use it in a sentence, but we'll continue and we can explore that more.
And we say it that way kind of to over embellish, but that's sometimes how life feels.
Yes.
Right? Of course, I want 5 chocolate chip cookies. And I might not feel really good after I eat all of them in one sitting.
Yeah.
Right? That's a really benign example.
It's like we're your textbook in 5th grade and there's a little character and you're reading the sentence and you can use it in your own sentence, but we're just giving you a little.
Right. So I use the word and a lot because it just helps me sit with contradiction. When I have really big feelings and I'm confused about something or I'm looking at something that I love and it has a big foundation in my life with a new lens, having that phrase, of course, and helps me to just sit with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that because I think that's kind of given me the opportunity to explore ideas and really over embellish that and it helps a lot, actually.
It helps a lot. I mean, we could go through politics, we could go through religion, we could go through health, we could talk about our garden, but it gives you space to have empathy and it gives you space to hold on to what's important to you. At least it does for me.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
But also as I've grown and as I've aged, like I see things in a new lens. I see things with a new perspective. And to allow space to just hold these two things. I am really surprised because the things that I thought were super black and white when I was younger are really complex. Good things and bad things that are so much more nuanced than I ever even imagined when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I think that childlike simplicity helped me understand the world that I was in at the time. And now as I'm an adult, helping my kids navigate more challenging situations than I had to navigate. And as I'm running a business and as I'm out in the world, it just holding space for complex issues allows me not to get emotional about it and just be like, hey, there's these two ways to think about it.
Yeah, and it's so easy to get so caught up in your feelings that like this person doesn't think the way that I do, and now am I wrong? Right? Am I wrong because this person that seems like a good guy disagrees with me? We have different viewpoints. Does that mean I'm wrong and he's right, or he's right and I'm wrong? It's like, no, actually, there's a possibility that it's like maybe one way is right for him, one way is right for you. Maybe it's the fact that maybe there's a mixture of those two ideas. It's actually a more productive way of thinking, and allow yourself the space to explore that without getting like caught up, in that tidal wave of emotion and letting it carry you off into the sea.
Yeah.
Right? Instead, you're like, hey, I got my little floaty on and I'm just going to chill over here. I'm going to have a rope, tie it to the dock, but I'm also going to let myself like kind of ride the wave a little bit.
Yes, I love that.
Explore that feeling.
Explore the feeling.
And maybe not if you don't feel like it. That's also mindfulness of like, maybe you're not ready for that, but I mean, don't like make them feel bad for it. Maybe you're not ready for it and you're just like, hey, cool.
I love that. So I'm a writer.
Yeah.
And I like to write.
Yes.
I write for work and then I write for fun. I write all the time.
And then she writes in bed. She writes on the computer. She writes on the Bible.
As I've been exploring this topic, I've actually been thinking about grammar. This is kind of nerdery.
I've been talking about grammar.
I've been thinking about grammar. But the difference, so I've been starting to write the word and. I'll do like a period at the end of a sentence and then I'll write and in all caps. But I'm like, that's not right. I'm wanting to separate my thoughts completely. I'm like, that the paradox is that the and has to combine two thoughts in a single sentence. So if you're not ready for the and you just want to say, of course, I like French fries from Wendy's the best, period, end of sentence. That's okay. Like if that's where you're at, that's a really silly example, but
I like these examples.
We want to keep it light because we don't want to get in the drudgery of the hard things. But if you have the courage to have a comma and then you have that little word and, it allows you to have different thoughts to have closer proximity, which is the whole point in sitting with complexity.
Yes, and it's like those ideas are holding hands rather than making them like these two separate things. It's like marriage.
This is what brings us together today.
No, but it's like holding hands. There's these two separate things, and they might not like. I don't know. Sometimes they merge perfectly and you can blend them up and it's this awesome thing. But sometimes they're just holding hands and they're just two separate things, but they're holding hands. They're coming together. They're meeting in one spot.
And I think we've become so polarized that we think that the people in the opposite political party are our enemies.
Right.
But they're not.
Yeah. And that's always kind of baffled me because I was talking with you at some point, and we were talking about how, at least for me, when I was a kid, for some reason, I've always gravitated to talking to people with different opinions and different...
So good at that.
Yeah, with different backgrounds and with different, all sorts of people. I just have always loved talking and learning from them and just like understanding. Maybe they have a different religion or they, their family does things completely different. And I'd always kind of just loved like learning about a different person and how they live.
Yes.
And I've never wanted to change their mind.
Ooh.
Like I've always wanted to learn about them, learn about what they did, respect and hold space for them, and not change them. I've never been the type of person that's like going into a conversation with someone with a different background than I and just been like, oh, I gotta change you or convert you to my opinion. I've never felt that way.
I think that is a gift. And I think that's something that is intrinsic in your core.
And I find that now that I'm an adult, I find that skill so important and crucial to like who I am, to my core, but also it just helps you so much.
It's almost like it's not that you want to convert them to your viewpoint. It's you want to convert other people to seeing other people's viewpoint without wanting to change them.
Yeah.
Like you want to spread the love and like we can learn about each other and support each other and have conversations and solve problems with people of different viewpoints. Solving problems is so much better if we're getting people with different backgrounds and education and viewpoints than if you have people in the room that are all thinking the same way and they have the same values and the same expectations and the same education. We won't come up with new ideas that will actually solve the new problems.
Right.
And if we won't live by people who are different than us, and if we won't go to school with people who don't have different opinions than us, then literally the division isn't the North and the South like it was in the Civil War. It's like the division amongst communities and that like we're all independent rather than connected.
That has never worked ever.
It's never worked.
How boring would it be if, taking the metaphor as far as it can go, if you're only looking in literally black and white? How boring.
You can take that topic and pull it to the extreme to make the point that we are designed for connection. Humans are designed for connection. We're designed for touch. We're designed for eye contact. We're designed to communicate. And I think it's important for us as individuals and as communities to recognize like we're stronger together and diversity is actually what brings us strength.
Yes.
The second thing I wanted to share is to find common ground. I love this quote, the phrase, "Can't we all agree that?" ... I love that phrase. It's like, can't we all agree that? So we're presenting our information in a way that we're finding common ground. Like it makes like, what's the lowest common denominator in the debate, whether it's at work or school or religion or politics? What's the lowest common denominator that we can agree with? But how can we start the agreement process?
Right. I love that because we do the opposite. We try to look for the disagreements a lot of like, how do I disagree with you? But since when can we talk about marriage again?
Sure.
If your husband, I don't have a husband, so I don't know that much, but if your husband comes in and he's like, "Hey, babe, the floor, it's broken." I don't know how marriage works. But if your husband or whatever, your wife, comes in and they're immediately, the first thing that they present you with is a problem, you're going to be like, dude, I'm not even in the space to even fix or help you or do anything. I immediately don't want to help you because you're this irritation blob just coming into my space. And immediately, I'm not going to try to help you out. We're not on the same team in that moment, right?
Yeah.
But if it's in your marriage, they come in and they're like, "Hey, babe, love you so much. Love your fit. You're beautiful." I don't know how marriage works. How about, "Oh, I have an idea." And then they're like, "Oh, what's your idea?" "Oh, what if we fix the flow?" Right?
Can we agree that the flow was broken? Let's go fix the flow.
But, no, just that idea of like, if I'm an irritation blob and I'm coming into someone else's space, are they going to want to agree with me? Or are we going to find common ground? But if you go into conversations and into communicating with other humans and you're like, "Hey, let's do it together. We're on the same team."
Yeah.
What do we agree on? Yeah. That the floor needs to be fixed,
Right. I think it probably would activate a different part of your brain.
Yes.
I don't know what part it would activate, but it'd be different.
Hey, brain scientist.
I know, brain scientist.
Shout out to you.
Pop it in the comments.
Pop it in.
Pop in the comments. Okay, do you know who Michael J. Fox is?
I've heard his name. Is he the singer?
No. He was an actor in the 80s, and he's still alive. He was in Back to the Future.
I've never seen it.
Oh my gosh, I have failed as a parent.
So there's a lot of things I haven't.
Oh my gosh, so I think in the
he the
film
guy,
or he was the guy with the puffy jacket, the red puffy jacket.
Cool.
He was the high school kid.
Yeah, he was he okay? So rewind. Yeah, was he Ferris Bueller?
No, that was a different guy.
They all look the same to me. 80s
boy. Broderick married Sarah Jessica Parker. Both famous, same time period.
Great. Awesome. Cool.
So this is irrelevant, but I think it's important for the younger generation to know about Back to the Future. There was this crazy scientist who helped Michael J. Fox go to the past when his parents were dating and then come back to the future, which is the future from the past. And I think it's been long enough that we're in the same distance from when their past went to their future from their future to now.
I'm mixed up, but I believe in you.
Math.
Yes.
Math. Irrelevant.
Math?
Math.
This is biology.
Math. But Michael J. Fox got sick. He has Parkinson's, and so he wasn't able to act anymore. Super, super famous, and he has a family and has a great relationship with his family. But he said recently, gratitude makes optimism sustainable.
Ooh.
Gratitude makes optimism sustainable. So you think about his background. He was this famous movie star, at the top of his game. He had his whole career in front of him, and he was destroyed by chronic health challenges. And in the face of that adversity, the lesson he's taken us as we've watched him deteriorate is that, number one, is that optimism is possible even with the challenges that the world is facing right now. And I think that's so important. But willpower only takes us so far. Willpower of like, I'm going to decide there's hope in the future, but still being inundated with frustration and doubt. That the way that we sustain optimism is through the practice of gratitude. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I love that. How do you, in your own life, put that into practice?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the thing that I love about gratitude is that gratitude keeps us in the present moment. So it's really easy to feel anxious about the future. It's really easy to be anxious about the political cycle. It's really easy to be anxious about taxes and finances and all those things. Your worries may be different because you're in a different life situation. But anxiety is all in the future. Depression, in my opinion, is all in the past.
It's like the turtle, Master Oogway. What did he say? He said, this is actually a good quote from Master Oogway himself.
Master Oogway himself said,
okay, this is so funny because I love how you're like, yeah, 80s guy. And then I'm like, in Kung Fu Panda 1. Okay, they're saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why we call it the present.
You can check the show notes for the reference on that quote.
That's from Kung Fu Panda 1. The best Kung Fu Panda in the franchise.
Yes, yes. But gratitude helps us stay in the present. So one of the things, and I was actually just talking to a friend about this today, is like breathing. How often are we holding our breath? But like feeling our bodies and enjoying our food and slowing down and really looking at everything you have in your life right now is something that you wanted or wished for. Everything in your life right now is something that you wanted at some point or you wished for. And how often are we always just looking forward to I don't have enough as I am right now, so I'm looking forward to that thing that I'm going to build or make or create or earn, and never taking a moment to just sit. Feeling the sun on your face, feeling the yummy chocolate melts in your mouth. Whatever that joy means to you, just having a moment to feel grateful for those things. You can write it down. There's a lot of people who will do a gratitude practice and actually write it down. And I think there's something really cool about creating new neural pathways and with writing things. The connection between our hand motion and our brain is so, so powerful. But whether it's just taking a moment to think and to breathe and to feel grateful, or going to that next step and writing things down, I think having gratitude and expressing gratitude is so important. I am married.
She knows about marriage.
You know about marriage. But one of the things is like thanking my spouse for what he does do for us. I think that it can be really easy in family systems when there's the rote and the redundant behaviors of cleaning and cooking and doing, like, he has his jobs, I have my jobs, but like just taking a minute to say, hey, thank you for doing that thing again that you do every week that makes our family better. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, try not being like, the floor, it's broken.
You could say, can't we all agree that? Having gratitude, I think, is really important. And collectively, I think if we're practicing gratitude, I think collectively the experience and the temperature of the community can be improved. And the last quote that I wanted to share today, Sharon McMahon is one of my favorite Instagrammers. You can find her on Instagram at Sharon Says So.
Oh, love Sharon.
My friend Sharon. But she said the antidote to despair is action. Because I think if we're diving into paradox and we're diving into contradiction and we're diving into like there's these different things that are opposite, can feel really overwhelming. But like, I'm just one person. I only have so many hours and so much energy in the day. Like, what difference can I make? That's like the biggest lie that has ever been said. But that individually, if we can decide what we want to contribute, I don't have to carry the weight of all the world's problems, of whales and ocean water and garbage and politics. I can't do anything about all of that. But what if there's like one thing I can do, right? What if I volunteer at my son's elementary school for an hour? What if I take a minute and send a voice text to my friend who I miss and I haven't, just to tell them I love them? What if I put down my social media before I go to bed and I spend time with my child or I talk to my daughter? But like, I think if we can take action on the thing that's important to us, what's speaking to our soul, and do what we can with the resources we've been given, that's another way that massive change can happen.
I love that a lot. And I find when I use tools like that, it really alleviates my anxiety. It alleviates that mental load, mental struggle, mental pain of like, this is so hard. I would really encourage our listeners to, take a little moment to write in your journal something you're grateful for, or in your notes app on your phone, or maybe it's a little video. To just say, what are you grateful for in the moment? And, what's your why? That's a harder one. So maybe not, that's a longer moment. But it's, what's your why?
So it's like all of us have a purpose on earth. All of us have a mission. All of us have light inside of us that we can use to find joy, to experience pleasure,
yes,
to give back to the community. And so I think that is a deeper question, I think. But having a purpose and having a why allows us to get through the paradox.
Yes, and at least for me, I think some people think, oh, if I have a purpose on Earth, that means like an asteroid has to come and hit me in the face, and the asteroid will tell me what my why is. Some star, if I wish on the right on the night of the second, and it's gonna tell me what my why is, and it's not internal, it's external, and it's gonna be told to me. I don't think that way. At least for me, it's like your why can come from inside. And maybe it's small. Maybe it's like what you said. Maybe it's my why right now in this time of my life is to make the people around me feel loved. Or my why is I want to be the best version of myself so that my kids will have a good role model to look up to.
Mm-hmm.
Or that they have a stable human taking care of them. Because that's hard. And that's already accomplishing something.
I love that. And how beautiful that you have the desire to want to help other people feel loved. That it stems from our capacity to feel love for ourselves, and that we're inherently worthy of love without some big task list or some big monumental international mission. That inherently that you and I are lovable just as we are. And that when we feel that love and nourish that love, the natural response is that we want to show that love to other people. And it might be somebody at the grocery store. A couple weeks ago, I was in line at Walmart, and the lady across on the other checkout line for self-checkout, she was buying Funyuns.
Love Funyuns.
And she only had Apple Pay, and Walmart doesn't take Apple Pay. And I was like, let me buy your Funyuns. And I bought her Funyuns, and I told her happy birthday, even though her birthday was like 6 months away. But it's like this little baby tiny interaction, this universal, this in the universe is this microscopic moment. But that feeling of like, I can show the lady buying Funyuns at the grocery store that she's loved. Right? And if we have our eyes open to that, it's shocking how easy and how many experiences come just out of the blue.
Yeah, or just acknowledging something, like telling someone something you've thought before, right? So I have a girl in my class, and she's so cool. She's just like what I want to be. She's a go-getter. She works really, really hard, and I just really admire that. And so one day I was like, you know what? You are so cool. Like, I look up to you so much. You're a go-getter. I can see how driven you are, and I'm just like so proud of you, right? And I don't know what effect that had on her. It might have had nothing. It might have been awesome. It made her feel good for a minute, you know? And that's really all that I need, right? But, you know, how good would it feel if someone came up to you and they were like, hey, I've been thinking for a long time. This always comes up when I'm around you, but there's this feeling and I just need to share it. And how just that little thing, it doesn't cost anything. It's like maybe 1 minute of your day, but it might help to kind of get out of your own head and, you know, make someone else feel seen.
I love that. Like, I'm grateful. And as you're sitting there thinking about what you're grateful for, it's like an outward expression. Like, I'm grateful for this friend in my class who's such a good role model. That probably totally made her day.
Yeah. And it's like, I want to be told that I'm awesome, you know? So in order to be told that you're awesome, you got to go tell someone they're awesome. And, you know, you never know what will happen.
It's like a boomerang.
It is.
So to end off our podcast today, we want to share a snippet of thought about our favorite K-drama.
That's my favorite time.
This is such a good K-drama. Real story. As a business professional in a fancy business meeting with my accountant, a CFO, he was saying, he's like, I told him I like watching K-dramas with my kids. And he said, my wife made me watch a K-drama. And I was like, stop. Let me guess which one it was. There's thousands of them on Netflix.
So many. I have a Google Doc. You want to see it?
I know. It's so cool. And I was like, Crash Landing on You. And he's like, yes, how did you know? And I was like, because it's the best.
It is the best.
It's the best.
So good.
So Anna, how does Crash Landing on You, how does it, give us the quick version of like, how can that teach us about paradox?
Okay, so this is, everybody open your laptop, go watch it, and then come back. No, it's like 16 hours of content. So what happens is a South Korean businesswoman decides, I'm going to go on a paragliding. It goes paragliding. And she's like, I'm going to go paragliding. And then she gets in her little paragliding thing. And then she's in South Korea. And then there's a storm. There's a storm. Oh, no, what am I going to do? Oh, she falls into a tree. But guess where? Not in South Korea. It's in North Korea. Guess what? For all your listeners, all the listeners who don't remember North Korea, yeah, they are isolated from the rest of the world, super communist. so right. Yeah, she gets in a tree, and you can't leave North Korea. That's not how that works. So she falls, meets a man, he doesn't like her at first, but then they fall in love. And the paradoxical part of this is there's a little village, and there's all these ajumas, as you call it, and they're sitting there, and there's this cute little community, but they find a lot of joy in their community and connection in their community amidst the craziness and starvation moment and the sadness of living in North Korea. That's what happens.
That's what happens.
And the South Korean woman who fell, who's like this big CEO, she's super rich, but she's not fulfilled in her heart because back at home she has everything, but she feels like she has nothing in her home in her heart because she doesn't have a community of people to be around her.
And the characters find love, and they find connection, and they find compassion, and they work together to help each other reach their goals. So despite having the painful separation of being in these two different countries, they're able to find connection and love. And so I think in our own lives, I think that's a really good example because it's such an extreme example. But I think that the challenges that we're facing in our communities today can be painful, and we can experience joy and connection and forgiveness and healing despite challenging circumstances existing. And I think that's the beauty of having a fleshy body to like have a life to live, is that we get to practice these things so that we can experience joy amongst hardship. You guys, thanks for tuning in on our Mom, I'm Home podcast. So glad that you're here. What are your closing thoughts for today's episode? What's your takeaway?
My takeaway is I want to make people feel loved. You know, we as people can connect with people that may not completely agree with our views. And that's okay, and that's allowed.
I love that we talked today about, and I think that's the easiest takeaway to remember. But I really loved the concept of loving other people. And I think this whole paradox conversation, what it boils down to for me, is increasing my capacity to love other people. Thanks you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys tune in next week on the Mom, I'm Home podcast.
Bye.